The stagecoach groaned to stop in front of Dry Creek's dusty Main Street, sending a swirl of ochre dust into the late afternoon air. Clara Whitmore clutched the edge of the worn leather seat, her gloved hands trembling more from nerves than the rickety ride. The sun slanted low across the horizon, painting the wooden storefronts in shades of fire and gold, and a faint bray of a mule echoed from somewhere down the street. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The wary glances, the hushed whispers, the cold indifference of strangers who had never seen her face before. Instead, she was met with silence. Not hostile, but watchful. The town's few residents paused in their work. One man scraping a wagon wheel, a woman sweeping the saloon's creaking porch, but none rushed forward with jeers or judgment. Then she saw him. Luke McCallister stepped out from the shadow of the general store, his tall frame outlined by the blazing sunset. Dust clung to his boots, and the brim of his hat cast a shadow over eyes that were sharper than a rattlesnake's strike. He didn't smile, didn't speak at first. He simply studied her with a quiet intensity that made her heart tighten. His hand rested casually on the butt of his revolver, though the tension in his stance suggested he wasn't ready to draw. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was low, edged with gravel, and something softer that made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. "Yes," Clara said, standing a little straighter, despite the creeping fear that she was stepping into a world far harsher than Boston ever was. I'm Clara." Luke's gaze softened just enough for her to see it, though his posture remained protective, almost predatory. Slowly, he extended a callous hand toward her, palm open. "Welcome to Dry Creek," he said. "Here, a lady like you, well, you might as well take my hand. It's safer than the street." Clara hesitated. The townsfolk murmured among themselves, a horse whinnied, and a dog barked somewhere behind the general store. Dust swirled around them, glinting like tiny sparks in the dying light. Finally, she placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm against the cool fabric of her glove. There was strength there, but not brutality. Steady reassurance, like the first solid piece of ground she had felt since leaving home. He gave a slight nod, as if the gesture were both introduction and promise. "Come on," he said, his voice rough but certain. "The house ain't far, and I reckon you'll need a moment to get used to this place." Clara allowed herself a small, almost shy smile, letting him guide her across the uneven street. Every step kicked up clouds of dust that clung to her skirts, but she didn't mind. With Luke's hand in hers, the fear that had clutched at her chest loosened just enough to let hope seep in. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped, and the last rays of the sun glimmered over the prairie. For the first time since she'd set out on this journey, Clara felt the faint stirrings of possibility. Maybe this harsh, dusty town and this rugged, quiet cowboy could be more than a test of endurance. Maybe, just maybe, it could be home. The wagon jolted over the uneven trail, sending Clara's bonnet askew in the warm prairie wind whipping through her hair. Ahead lay the McCallister Ranch, a sprawling patchwork of sun-baked earth wooden fences and corrals filled with restless horses. The scent of hay, leather, and smoke from the cook fire wrapped around her like a strange, welcoming cloak. Her fingers clutched the edges of her skirts as she tried to steady herself, her heart racing not just from the ride, but from the realization that this would be her new life. Luke rode alongside the wagon, his horse moving with sure-footed grace over the rocky terrain. He didn't speak much, letting the rhythm of the animals and the soft clatter of wheels fill the silence. When he finally did, his voice was low, carrying the authority of a man used to commanding both land and livestock. "The barn's to the left. Don't let the horses spook you. They sense fear faster than the coyote scents prey." Clara swallowed, nodding, though her stomach knotted. She had never handled a horse, much less faced the labor of ranch life. The fences loomed like barriers, the open field stretched endlessly, and the sun beat down with relentless intensity. Her gloved hands itched to touch, to help, but she felt unprepared, exposed, like a delicate flower in a harsh desert. Here, Luke slid from his saddle and held out a hand to help her down. Take your time. Ain't no rush. Clara hesitated, then accepted it, feeling the grit of his calloused skin against her own. A flush of warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. She caught herself glancing at him, noticing the way his hat shadowed the sharp line of his jaw, the faint twitch of a smile he didn't fully allow himself. The first tasks were simple yet humbling. She carried buckets of water, mucked out stalls, and struggled with the stubborn horses, each misstep drawing a patient correction from Luke. "Easy now," he said one time, lifting a particularly stubborn horse's head with effortless strength. "You're not fighting it. You're guiding it. Let it trust you." His eyes met hers as he spoke, and she felt as if he weren't just talking to the horse. By mid-afternoon, sweat stung her brow and her arms ached, but something in her heart shifted. This life, this land, this man, it was raw, unforgiving, and breathtaking all at once. Yet, the shadow of tension loomed. A distant rider approached at a trot, raising a cloud of dust that darkened the horizon. Clara squinted and saw the rider's rough outline, realizing the rival rancher Luke had warned about. Luke stiffened, one hand resting on his revolver, the other instinctively brushing a stray lock of Clara's hair behind her ear. "Don't worry," he murmured, voice calm but firm. "We've faced worse. You just stay behind me." Clara's pulse surged, not with fear alone, but with a thrilling mix of anxiety and attraction. In this wild, dusty land, danger wasn't abstract. It was tangible, immediate, and somehow intoxicating. And standing beside Luke, even for a moment, she realized that survival wasn't just about grit. It was about trust. As the rider drew nearer, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the ranch. Clara squared her shoulders, gripping the bucket in her hands like a shield, and met Luke's steady gaze. For the first time, she felt a flicker of certainty. Perhaps she was stronger than she believed, and maybe, just maybe, Luke McCallister was someone she could rely on in this world that was both cruel and beautiful. The saloon door swung open with a creak, spilling warm lamplight and the scent of whiskey into the dusky street. Clara paused on the threshold, clutching her bonnet and skirt, taking in the scene. Men in worn hats leaned over the bar, spurred boots tapping on creaking floorboards, and a fiddle cried out a lively tune in the corner. Laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, and the air was thick with smoke and anticipation. She swallowed hard, aware of the curious eyes that followed her every step. Luke stepped beside her, tall and steady as always, his hand brushing the small of her back. Not in a formal gesture, but as if instinct demanded it. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice low and protective. "This place can be more dangerous than the trail sometimes." Clara gave a small, nervous nod. Every instinct screamed to retreat but curiosity, and something deeper drove her forward. They moved through the crowd, the floorboards groaning under their boots, until they reached a small cleared space where couples twirled in a whirlwind of skirts and dust. Luke extended a hand, his eyes catching hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Dance with me?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Clara hesitated. She had never danced like this, had never been so close to a man whose presence seemed to command both fear and fascination. But the look in his eyes, a mixture of challenge and invitation, compelled her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, feeling the strength of his fingers curl around hers. The music swelled, fiddle strings shrilling, and Luke led her with surprising ease. For a moment, the world outside the saloon vanished. The chatter, the smoke, the clinking glasses faded into a blur. Her heart pounded not just from the rhythm of the dance, but from the thrill of proximity to him. Luke's grip was firm but gentle, guiding her with patient skill. Their eyes met, and Clara felt an unspoken connection, a spark that neither words nor distance could dim. Then chaos erupted. A drunken man lurched into their path, shouting insults at a nearby gambler. Luke's hand tightened around hers, and his other hand hovered near his holster as he stepped between the man and Clara. "Easy there, friend," he said, his voice calm but edged with authority. "You don't want trouble tonight." The man sneered and lunged, but Luke's steady presence and measured words diffused the threat. Clara's pulse raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration, as she realized she had witnessed not only his skill, but his instinct to protect. As the altercation ended, Luke's hand returned to hers, fingers brushing in a silent reassurance. "You're brave," he said softly, his gaze lingering on her face, catching the warm glow of lamplight on her cheeks. Clara's lips curved into a small, shy smile. "I'm learning," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the fiddle's tune. As the song ended and the dancers dispersed, they remained in the center of the saloon, the heat of the moment hanging like the summer dust outside. For the first time, Clara understood that life in Dry Creek was unpredictable, dangerous, and intoxicating, and that Luke McCallister was a man she wanted by her side, through every trial and every heartbeat. The sun hung low over McCallister Ranch, burning the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. Clara sat on the porch steps, her fingers tracing the worn wood as a gentle breeze carried the scent of hay, horses, and the faint smoke from the evening fire. Luke leaned against a railing nearby, his hat tilted back, revealing eyes softened by the dying light. The ranch was quiet now, the earlier chaos of the day replaced by the serene rhythm of the prairie, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through tall grass, the occasional snort of a horse settling in its stall. Clara swallowed, the words she had held in her chest all day trembling at the edges of her mind. "Luke, why do you stay here?" "Out here, so far from everything?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the whisper of the wind. Luke's gaze drifted toward the horizon, jaw tight with memories he seldom shared. "I lost my folks when I was a boy," he admitted, voice low and rough. "Bandits left me this land, this ranch, and a promise to protect it. Haven't had much reason to let anyone in since." "Not really." Clara's chest tightened. She understood loss, understood the loneliness that gnawed at the soul. I left Boston because I was scared," she confessed, her eyes glistening. "Scared I'd never belong anywhere, that I'd always be alone." She hesitated, then let out a shaky laugh. "Funny, isn't it? Here I am, in the middle of nowhere, with a cowboy who probably thinks I'm fragile as a feather, and yet I don't feel afraid anymore." Luke shifted closer, the porch boards creaking under his weight. His hand hovered near hers, then settled gently over hers, callous and warm. "Fragile?" he said, a hint of teasing in his voice. "Maybe you're stronger than you think." Her breath hitched as their fingers intertwined, the touch electric in the amber glow of sunset. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sigh of wind and the distant lowing of cattle. Clara turned her head slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Luke, I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, the land, the danger she whispered. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You're already braver than most," he said, voice husky with emotion. "And you don't have to be ready alone. I'll be here, every step." The prairie light deepened, painting their faces with fiery hues. Without another word, he leaned closer, and Clara felt the warmth of his breath, the solid presence of his chest, and then their lips met in a tentative, lingering kiss. It wasn't rushed or passionate in the reckless sense. It was a careful, deliberate melding of two hearts cautiously discovering trust, desire, and something much deeper. When they finally pulled apart, the last of the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a twilight painted in shades of violet and copper. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, her heart beating in rhythm with the vast, untamed land before them. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet grandeur of the West, both of them understood something unspoken, that whatever storms or dangers awaited, they would face them together. The ranch, the prairie, and the fading light held witness to a bond forged not just from attraction, but from shared vulnerability, courage, and the first true flicker of love. The first crack of gunfire split the evening air, sharp and sudden against the hush of the prairie. Clara froze, clutching a lantern as the shadows from the flickering flame danced across the barn walls. Luke appeared at her side instantly, his hand tightening over hers, eyes scanning the darkness with a predator's precision. Dust swirled around their boots as the sound of spurred boots and shouted orders echoed from the corral. The rival rancher had come, and he wasn't alone. "Stay behind me," Luke growled, his voice low and controlled, though Clara could feel the tension vibrating through his broad shoulders. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear, adrenaline, and an undeniable thrill she couldn't quite name. She nodded, gripping the lantern tighter, aware that every step she took could bring them closer to danger, or worse. The raiders stormed in, horses whinnying, guns raised. Luke moved with the calm authority of a man born for these moments. Bullets ricocheted off wood, and Clara ducked instinctively, feeling the heat of each near miss. Despite the chaos, Luke's hand never left hers. Every touch reassured her, anchoring her in the storm. "Luke," she called over the roar of gunfire. "What do we do?" He didn't answer, only pressed a finger to his lips before nodding toward a stack of hay bales. Clara followed, crouching low as Luke led them through the barn. She could hear the shouting, the rattle of spurs, the sharp bark of commands, and the occasional desperate cry of a horse. Each moment was stretched taut, every heartbeat a drum of danger and desire. Once behind cover, Luke peered out from the shadows, his jaw tight, eyes fierce. "I'll handle them. You keep the horses safe." Clara nodded, her hands shaking, but she rose to the task, her earlier fears melting into determination. She guided the animals into the inner corral, whispering soft reassurances to the panicked horses. For the first time, she felt the strength of the land and the life around her pulse through her veins. The West was harsh, yes, but she could survive here and fight for the people she had come to care about. Luke emerged from the fray moments later, dust coating his boots and a few scratches on his arms. His eyes found Clara, and the tension broke just enough for him to smile, a small, dangerous curve of lips that sent warmth rushing through her chest. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough, worry flickering beneath the calm. Clara stepped toward him, lantern swinging, her own breath ragged. "I am now," she said, and without thinking, pressed herself against him. The danger, the adrenaline, the chaos, they all melted into the heat between them. Luke's arms wrapped around her, strong and steady, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Words weren't necessary. The world beyond the barn ceased to exist, leaving only dust, moonlight, and the pounding of two hearts. When they finally pulled apart, Luke brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "You've got fire, Clara, more than I realized." She smiled, leaning into him once more. "And you got a way of making me feel fearless," she whispered. Outside, the night stretched quiet, the threat gone for now, but inside the barn, something had shifted irreversibly. Trust had been tested, courage had been proven, and the bond between Clara and Luke had deepened, forged in gunpowder, dust, and heartbeat after heartbeat of shared peril. The morning sun rose over Dry Creek in a blaze of amber and gold, scattering long shadows across the prairie and warming the creaking boards of McCallister Ranch. Clara stood at the edge of the corral, brushing hay from her skirts, her hands steady now, her chest light with a sense of belonging she had never thought possible. The previous night's chaos, gunfire, danger, fear, had faded into memory, leaving behind only the calm certainty of survival and the quiet pride of having faced it all alongside Luke. Luke emerged from the barn, dust still clinging to his boots, the morning light catching the sharp line of his jaw. He paused when he saw Clara, a slow smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She looked up at him, a little dirty, a little sunburned, but more alive than she had ever been. Her eyes, bright and unwavering, met his, and in that silent moment, the years of loneliness, fear, and uncertainty melted away. "Morning," he said, voice rough but warm. He took a slow step toward her, boots crunching on the gravel. "You rested well?" Clara laughed softly, the sound carrying across the still prairie. "Better than I ever have. Feels right here," she said, tapping her chest lightly, over her heart. Luke's expression softened, and he extended his hand, not in the formality of a greeting, but with the intimacy of shared experience, trust, and unspoken love. "Then let me say it properly this time," he said, his eyes locking on hers. "Welcome home." Clara's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts relief, joy, and love. She stepped forward, letting her fingers slip into his, feeling the rough calluses of his palm against the soft warmth of her own. The wind stirred the prairie grasses, carrying the faint scent of smoke, hay, and the wide-open promise of a new life. She didn't have to worry about fitting in or being accepted. Here with Luke, she had already found her place. The townsfolk were already stirring, the faint chatter of morning carrying across the streets, but Clara and Luke were in a world apart. He led her through the ranch, past the horses grazing lazily in the sunlight, past the fences and barns that bore witness to so much danger and triumph. Every corner, every familiar detail of the land seemed to shine with a new light, colored by the bond they shared. Finally, they paused on the porch, the prairie stretching endlessly before them. Luke pulled her close, arms firm around her waist, and Clara rested her head against his chest. The warmth of him, steady and protective, filled her with a sense of peace she had never known in Boston, never known anywhere. "You belong here," he whispered, his lips brushing her hair. "With me, with this place, with all of it." "I do," Clara murmured, her hands tracing the line of his shoulders, committing the moment to memory. "And I never want to leave." The sun climbed higher, casting the ranch in golden light. A breeze carried the distant calls of coyotes, the lowing of cattle, and the gentle creak of the windmill turning. In that vast, untamed land, Clara and Luke stood together, hearts beating in quiet synchrony, unshaken by the dangers they had faced, and ready to face whatever else the West might throw their way. Together, Dry Creek was no longer a town of strangers and doubt. It was home, and in each other's arms they had found love, courage, and a promise as enduring as the endless prairie before them. The sun dipped low over the prairie, painting the horizon in molten gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the McCallister ranch. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the faint strains of fiddle from the distant saloon, mingling with the soft nickering of horses settling into their stalls. Dust rose in lazy swirls, catching the light like tiny sparks, and the air smelled of hay, leather, and the promise of evening. Clara stood at the edge of the corral, her skirts dusted with the day's work, heart still racing from the excitement and danger they had survived together. Luke approached, spur boots crunching over the dry earth, his hat tipped back just enough to reveal a faint, weary smile. He extended a hand, rough and steady, and she placed hers in it, feeling the weight of the land, the past, and the future all held in that single touch. "I promise you a home," he said softly, voice carrying over the wind, and I meant every word. Clara's eyes glistened as she stepped closer, letting the warmth of his hand anchor her. "You already gave me more than that, Luke," she whispered. "You gave me courage, trust, and love." He pulled her close, arms strong around her, and for a moment the prairie, the ranch, the dangers, They all faded. The world was nothing but this golden light, the soft murmur of the wind, and the steady beat of two hearts finding each other. As the sun slipped behind the hills, Luke brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then stay with me, Clara. Let's face whatever comes together. She smiled, resting her forehead against his. Always, she murmured, her voice full of promise. And under the blazing western sky, with dust swirling around them like memories and dreams, they stood united, no longer strangers, no longer uncertain, only home, love, and the endless horizon ahead.